Welcome to A Cup of Gratitude with Amanda Schaefer. Hi, I'm your host, and I'm so glad you stopped by. This podcast is really for anyone, anywhere, anytime, and it's about taking a moment to slow down and look around and actually see all of the good things that are there. There's no question that asks, is your cup half empty or half full? But I think a better question is, what's in your cup? I mean, a drop of gratitude will benefit your life unimaginably more than a full cup of anything else. So let's settle in and take a look at how we can shift our focus and embrace the joy and the wonder of the life that we have. And once you start, you won't be able to stop seeing the good. And just like me, you won't be able to stop talking about it. And somehow that creates even more. Even in the midst of difficulty, even when it's really hard. Learn how to drink from a cup of gratitude.
Welcome. Today I'm speaking with Stacey Gittens. She was born in Australia to show business parents. Stacey performed on screen and on stage before becoming a school teacher, children's author, and globetrotter. Now based in the UK as a creative consultant focusing on editing and design, Stacey enjoys collaborating with authors worldwide to create life-affirming and inclusive content. Committed to the excellence with belief that small changes are significant, that Stacey goes to the extra mile. She really does to transform projects into success stories with great value. And I'm so excited to have you join us today. Welcome, Stacey.
Thank you so much. I think you took my words. So excited was exactly what I was thinking as well.
Well, I am someone who, one of my qualities is I really love collaboration. I think everyone benefits. God created us for community, and I think he works really well when we create together and when we take the strengths and the things he purposefully deposited in us to use and we combine them with others. It reminds me of when you're in a small group of people and you're kind of talking about godly things or seeking godly advice, and how the Holy Spirit will give just a different piece of information of the whole picture to each person. And so together you may get more than you would get on your own. And so I just think it's such a beautiful thing. And I think too, as Christians, when we work together, when we play nicely, when we cheer each other on really from the heart, the world sees, and that's not how the world works. And there's no competition, there's no kind of desire to do better than someone. Instead, you're realizing that each one of us is running our own race, and why not applaud the person who's following their calling, right?
Definitely. I think I've been thinking about this quite a lot this week. I'm all about community, especially amongst the author community that I work with. And I really have been of late advocating on social media this sense of community in terms of getting behind people and being people's cheerleaders. And I was thinking about how in the Bible, if you look at the characters in the Bible, even Jesus had a team of 12 disciples. He didn't go out on his own, and he had quite a lot of people. 12 is a big number, and obviously Adam and Eve, you can kind of see in the Bible God places people in your life because we're meant to be part of community. I was also thinking about why I'm so passionate about it, and I actually grew up with 6 siblings, and I guess growing up in Australia, I was always part of a team, whether it was my family being such a big unit, or if it was because we went out as a team to perform. I've always had a great experience of teamwork and having lots of people to celebrate what we do together. And I think that's probably fundamentally why I'm so community focused in a lot of things that I do. I think it's just one of my natural tendencies. It's, again, you took the words out of my mouth when you were speaking about collaboration. It's definitely how I feel about it.
Well, I'm glad we're on the same page, and I've really enjoyed getting to know you. I think God brings me people to come on as guests that are also meant to be people in my life for lots of reasons, fellowship being one of them, and just that feeling of getting one another. And God himself is community, right? We're created in his image. And so I think that there's this internal part of us that knows that we are functioning in the fullness of who we were made to be when we finally find it. Not everybody gets what you got in childhood, which is beautiful and amazing. Some of us start off without it. And so we're constantly seeking something and we don't even know why. It's just like when we're seeking God and his presence in our life, we don't understand that there's this missing piece in our heart, right? We don't get it until we get it. And then when we're full, we know, oh, that now, I remember having a conversation with someone and they were talking to me, and this person does not yet know Jesus and God in their life. And I pray for them daily. But what she had said was she had always been missing something. And then she was talking about this new person in her life, and that's who she was missing. And my spirit kind of jumped, and I was trying not to have it show on my face. I said, no, what you're missing is Jesus, and I get it. And I think God will use that relationship to show her at some point that there is more. And, so I'm just excited for you that you got to start off that way. Now on this podcast, we do things a little differently, and we do start in your childhood. I think it provides a way for us to see all of the places that God's been working and all of the different stories that he's written. And some people know God and some people don't. And yet he shows up the same if we look from the beginning to what we're doing now. He shows up in the threads and the themes of our lives. And I have a lot of people who listen who don't go to church and they don't currently read the Bible, but they find the stories interesting because God is the best writer that there is. And they've started noticing, and in every story, even though they really vary in great detail, that God is the same. And so if that's all that I can put out there, I have done my job.
Definitely.
So would you be willing to tell us a little bit about your childhood?
So as I said, I was born in Australia and I spent my childhood in Australia. I have mostly sisters, 5 sisters, 1 brother, and we all have musical background, dramatic background. We grew up, my father was an actor and my mum was a dancer. Obviously, when she started having lots of kids, her career wasn't so much in our lives. But my dad, he definitely was on TV commercials and at one point a TV show and guest starred on different shows. So sometimes the children that we went to school would recognize my dad. Oh, I saw your dad on TV. And that was interesting. But eventually my dad owned a talent school and he ran a school for children who wanted to learn how to sing and dance and act. So we all kind of went to work with dad and trained up in those fields. And I guess as part of that, we went out and performed at shopping centres and Christmas carols in Australia. One of the best things I love about Christmas in Australia is it's nice and warm. It's very different from what a lot of your readers will experience. So we have carols in the park where it's beautiful sun. We have a stage and not so much candles, but lights and things like that. And we often would sing on the stage Christmas songs and perform. And I really loved it. I think the best thing about it is just to express joy and happiness and to share that with others. That was a brilliant childhood. So that was a big part of growing up. And the other part, I think, again, being from Australia, is being in the swimming pool. They're kind of my key childhood memories is swimming, sunshine. Maybe I'm reminiscing quite a lot on that because I'm now in the UK, and as I see my own children's upbringing being so different from my own, I often think about how blessed I was to have the sunshine and have, as I said, lots of brothers and sisters to enjoy life with and to grow with, and to I guess being the eldest, to learn so many skills. And I think I'm a bit of a mother hen as well. So I think just that growing up experience did shape a lot of who I am today and makes me grateful for things that I've had and experiences that may be different from others. But
Mhm.
I think the good thing about having different experiences and now being in a different culture altogether is realizing that not everybody has the same experience. And I think when you
That's
grow
right.
up, you kind of think everyone has the same experience as me, but especially traveling and going to a lot of different places across the world,
Mhm.
I have definitely realized that the experiences that we have are very different. The way we understand information, even when we read the Bible, we form images and pictures and understanding through our own experiences. So
That's right.
obviously the interpretations that we have for language and communication and the Bible is very subject to who we are as people. And God uses that, and he gives people different insights because of their experience. So I might read a Bible verse and have an insight. Someone else
Mhm.
might read a different Bible verse and have an insight. And again, that is why being in church and being in team in that sense is important too, because you
Mhm.
get a balanced approach when it comes to understanding. But I think also that what I've realized is when we're communicating with one another as well, I might say something to someone, or when you are writing a book, you might intend to say something, but somebody else is going to
That's
take
right.
it a completely different way.
Mhm.
So that's part of my job now when I'm reading text, is to think
Yeah.
about it from the perspective of many. And we often go through beta reading a process where we get lots of people from different countries,
Mhm.
especially because I'm well connected with Australia and UK and have lots of authors in Canada and America. I'm really lucky to be able to draw on that network to understand how the text is coming across for different purposes, for meaning,
Yeah.
for if it's a rhyming book, for how the accents are playing out. So yeah, I guess that one of the best things as well about having that experience of seeing language in action was I actually did visit Israel.
Can I stop you though? I'd
Yeah.
really want to get to that, all of that, but I'm really there's some things I'd like to still talk about in your childhood, and we will get to all of your story. I think it's important, that you are emphasizing this idea that we all have like our own lens, and I'd love to just look at that for a moment and put a pin right there. So there was actually a teacher, an English teacher one time, who did an experiment. And in that experiment, maybe there were 25 kids in the class, and they each had the same piece in front of them to read. And each person read, and every single person read slightly differently. Some people left words out, some people added words in. And it was this great example of what you're talking about, that we each have our own lens, we have our own experiences. And I think until you encounter other people, and go back to that sense of we were made for community, you don't know that you're only seeing through your own lens. And some people are seeing through a lens that has been um, muddied or blurred because of trauma or life experiences, and other people are seeing through a lens that just has never experienced what some of the other people in the world have. And so I think that's all really important, that you bring all of that into what you're doing now. I was just wondering, you had made the comment about when you were growing up, your memories really are, this sunshine and this water, and a feeling that your kids are not experiencing now. And I was wondering, when you had those lovely memories of being in the sunshine, or swimming and being in the water, Jesus is the light and he is the living water. And I think sometimes God uses creation and our environment, times when we're in creation, to really speak to us. Do you have any memories from when you're younger? I know you went to a Christian school, of memories where God encountered you outside of school, where you really connected with him in nature.
uh I guess in nature, well, the most visual memory that I guess is coming to mind is, again, it's being outside. I loved going to the beach, but we actually in our church, for whatever reason, did baptisms in the middle of winter in a swimming pool. And I remember being baptized outside in this swimming pool, and
Mhm.
remember going under the water and coming up and feeling I can't even express the words of how I felt at that moment. It was just a joy and just, I guess, an experiencing of the presence of God in
Mm.
that moment. And
Mm-hmm.
I think as much as that isn't a scenic place like a beach, I know in the UK, the church that I went to in London used to go down and do baptisms on Brighton Beach. And I can imagine I've attended as a spectator, but not being
Mm-hmm.
baptized. And that
Mm-hmm.
also, I suppose, is quite a stunning
Yeah.
event. But I guess
But I mean,
thinking,
water itself is creation, so that's what I'm after. So
yeah,
you're actually explaining what I was talking about. You have these memories of the sunshine and water, the things that were sticking out to you, of experiencing those things. And as you're talking about your baptism, I think it's amazing that you had that powerful moment of kind of going under and coming out, and how God uses like the things, the qualities about water, right? About what it feels like to go under and come back up again. Things are happening. There's noises, there's feelings on your skin, there's, being cut off from the world that you're normally in, and the sound goes away, and the bubbles of your breath, all of those things that, the author's coming out of me, sorry. All of those things that bring you into this moment of like, wow, I am going from death to life. I am going in and out, and something's changing. How old were you? Do you remember when you actually got baptized?
yes, I do. I was 12. I was actually thinking about
Wow.
this because my son is of a similar age and baptisms have come around in our church. But I was 12 and I got baptized with my mum and my dad and my sister. And I do remember it
Mm.
very vividly, us kind of waiting to go into the water, I think we were dressed in white, and just
Mm.
remember thinking, I'm so cold, I'm so cold, I'm so freezing cold. But then that's why I think I remember it so much, is because when
Yeah.
I got into the water, I was like, oh, I'm cold, I'm cold, I'm cold. And I went under the water and came back up, and it was like, I didn't think about the cold, I didn't think about anything. It was just
Wow.
this amazing warmth.
Hmm.
And I guess that's how, I mean, there's a couple of experiences in my childhood where I've known that God is real, and it's undeniably real. That would be one. Another
Hmm.
one was where I was quite ill one night. Well, I'd been feeling ill and I went to bed and I just felt really, really ill. I couldn't look at the light. I just knew something wasn't right. And I used to read my Bible. I had a little Precious Moments Bible, and I used to read that, and it was really something that I wanted to do. It wasn't my parents saying, hey, read your Bible. It was
Right.
something within me from an early age that wanted to know who God was. And I remember this night feeling really ill, but just thanking God for my healing. Thank you that I'm fine. Thank you, God, that you make me well. And I remember it was almost like a repeated process all night
Hmm.
long of just thanking God. And we went to the doctors, I think, the next day or somewhere around that time. And the doctor said, oh, it sounds like she had meningitis. Like, it sounded like it was pretty serious, but
Hmm.
she's fine now. And
Wow.
I just knew, I suppose, through that night, through that experience, that God was real, because I felt the tangible answer to prayer. And I think sometimes with God, when you ask him for things, you don't feel that tangible answer.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's even a no. Sometimes the answer is no, or sometimes an answer might come a year later, 10 years later. Sometimes it's not in our timing. But in that particular moment, I suppose it was very, very tangible, the answer. And that was a faith building moment for me. Even when I became 18, I suppose, and was at the age where I could drive myself to church, and I used to lead the worship music at church, and it was like, well, I don't have to do this. And it
Yeah.
was like, well, I know undeniably there's been too many experiences between 0 and 18 where I cannot deny the presence of God. I cannot deny that he is real. I cannot walk away, because it's like a relationship. It's literally like you grow up with your mum, dad, or whoever you grow up with, grandparents, carer,
Hmm.
foster mum, whoever you grow up with, and you know they're real. You
Yeah.
can't say, oh, I'm sorry, well, you don't exist anymore when you turn
Hmm.
18. So it was a bit like that
Yeah.
growing up for me. And I did go to a Christian school. I was very, very lucky that in my early years, up until the age of about 10, I went to a Catholic school, and then we moved to a different district, and my parents were able to get us on the waiting list to go to a bigger school, which went from year 5 all the way through to your finishing year, and that was Christian school. And so I was lucky because we had worship times every week. We called it chapel, where we'd have a time to worship together and for somebody to share the word. And I got involved with that. As I said, I used to lead worship, singing, and really was very, very blessed. But again, even in those situations, I remember one teacher once saying, raise your hands. This was very early on when I went to the Christian school, and it was a bit of a different way of worship. And I was like, well, I'm not going to do it because you told me to. It had to be.
Yes, it has to be organic. Yeah.
It had to be because that was what God was leading me to. And I think that, as I said, I've been blessed because I've had a varied experience. It's not just been one experience. And then obviously moving around as well now as an adult, there's been many churches that I've been to, and you see worship maybe in a different style, or the way that the word is shared in a different style. It's always the same God. It's always the same heart, but it's interesting how God speaks to people through different ways. Sometimes it's traditional, sometimes it's more charismatic, sometimes it's 10 people, sometimes it's 2,000 people, but it doesn't really matter if the message of God is at the center of it. If God's salvation is there.
If God speaks, let him speak the way he wants to. And I love the fact that you recognized there's a lot of people wrestle out receiving their own faith and not the faith that they were raised with or their parents' faith. And I love that you recognized in many different ways God's existence, that he was real. But I do love also that he allowed you to experience those tangible moments, because I think sometimes we need them. We have the example of doubting Thomas. He needed to see the scars. Jesus was resurrected from the dead. He didn't have to keep the scars in his hands, but there were people that were going to need to see them, like Thomas, right? And so that God knows some of us will be able to carry that tangible experience and make it like an Ebenezer stone where we can remember and say, oh yeah, I know. Because there are times in our life where we go through things where it's really easy to doubt. And so to me, that's just a beautiful gift that you had some of those things, but that you had the varied experience. Not everyone gets that. Now, you had told me as life moved on, that your parents eventually got a divorce. And I was wondering if you have memories of how that affected you. Did it affect you? I mean, I think anytime somebody's family changes, it really does, but we don't always remember.
I was, I guess, lucky because I spent most of my childhood with my parents. They didn't divorce until I was an adult, and my youngest sister, she was only a child. So the 7 kids spanned over 16 years. So I was grown up when they divorced. But both my mum and dad, my mum especially had been raised Catholic, and her mum was Catholic, and I guess her influence in my life has been a strong one. And my dad also had studied the Bible and been to Bible college, and I had memories of us talking as well. So I think when they got divorced, my heart was always for my family to stay together. And whenever problems would arise, I actually probably didn't think that it would ever get to the stage of them separating. So I think if we looked at my family, who would have wanted them to stay together more than anyone, it was probably myself. My younger sister, I guess, has grown up in a different kind of dynamic. But I think I did feel very sad about it. And obviously when it was happening, people grieve and people react differently out of grief. And I think at that time, my circumstances, I was trying to finish up university and different things happening. I guess my life kind of took a bit of a detour, a bit of a change to cope with everything. I suppose my own grief and my parents probably needed a little bit of support as well. So I guess how did it affect my life? It again gave me a range of different experiences to to draw upon that I hadn't experienced before. And I did do a little bit of a detour and went to live in to stay in Hong Kong for a couple of months. So I kind of moved out of home and was working for a family and did a little bit of travel, which was kind of like my window into traveling, which I didn't actually see in my life. And then I spent a little bit more time with my family, supporting them before moving on to becoming a teacher. And I think how it affected me was ongoing. It took a long time for me to get used to the new family dynamic, and my family's quite settled now. With the way our family operates is actually quite special. My dad will go around to my mum's house for Christmas Day. It's sad that I'm not there. I wish I was. I mean, it's actually so ironic that my family all meet at Christmas, and my mum and my dad not together but under the same roof with my mum's new husband. My dad was actually telling me what a great guy he is. So they're all kind of settled, and I do think it's ironic that I'm probably the one that wanted the family most together, and I'm the one that's
you can't be
out.
there,
And my sister, she used to travel around Asia. She used to sing, and she was away from home for a long time. And if anyone was going to be the one that was out in the world doing her thing, I would have thought it was my sister. I actually think I would thought I was going to be the settled down one in Australia with kids that were like me, and it's just been the opposite. But yeah, so the divorce, it took a long time for things to settle and pan out, and for everybody to be part of that team again, that team that was so special. And I think that's probably, as I said, growing up where we were a good team, even though sometimes a broken one, it was hard for me to not want that team to stay together. And maybe again, that's one of the reasons why when I'm on a project or when I'm part of a team, I'm not one to say, okay, editing done, off you go, see you later. That's the end of our road. I will still be there when your book comes out, telling everyone about it, marketing it with you, giving you any idea that pops into my head to help you be successful. And I think with my family, we definitely will always have those close bonds that stemmed from that time together. And I think divorce or no divorce, you can't. People think when you divorce that you can separate somehow and you'll never be connected almost. But I think when you are connected, it's for life. You can't. It's like two pieces of paper being glued together. You cannot rip it apart without some fragments sticking to the either side of the paper. So
absolutely, and I'm grateful that you were able to glean good things and good characteristics for your future out of wrestling through that time, whereas a lot of people don't have that result. Unfortunately, I have 2 divorces in my story. One of them, I didn't know God during either of them, didn't ask God who to marry either time, so it's really on me. But God's been really gracious and gave me 2 amazing children from each one of the marriages who do love him and are in my life. Now, my first divorce, I not only was more like your parents, we brought the families together. Actually mentored that ex-husband's wife, and they all came to the same church with us, and everyone got baptized and all know the Lord, which is really cool and wonderful for my daughter. But unfortunately, I also didn't ask God second time around. And right after I accepted Christ in my home, I wasn't going to church at the time. My then husband started showing signs of having bipolar disorder, started self-medicating, and became a pretty horrible alcoholic. And so, God brought me to a place of coming to him first and really strengthened my faith during that time. But unfortunately, he never was able to come around and get into recovery, and he's no longer in our family's life. But God taught us so many beautiful lessons. And you're right, in both cases, they're still always going to be part of my life. I when I share my story, that's part of my story, and that doesn't go away. And I think in the same way that a widow has grief about the things that might have been, right? I think people who are divorced have that too.
I think I can really relate to that. I think in my own marriage and in my own walk, marriage isn't easy. I think if you are in a marriage that it is happy all the time and you don't argue, that is quite rare. I think marriage is work. It takes work to come together. It
Sure.
is something that, especially I suppose in my own relationship, having families across the globe. So we've got family in Britain, we've got family in Australia, and it is hard to navigate your life when you've got that amount of distance between your two families. But I think that whether you're a child or an adult going through a divorce, whether you're the actual person going through a divorce or a child going through the divorce, there, as you would know, there is a lot of grief that comes from when divorce happens. So I think in my own life, it's made me really appreciate that when things get hard, or when you go into a marriage, that there has to be, I suppose, such a strong level of commitment that when you think you're not happy because of an argument, or because something's not going your way, or because you don't feel the romance anymore, or because you just don't feel that love today, I think it's in those situations that you can think of it. It's always important to remember that you can reach out to God and you can ask God to intervene in those parts, and he gives you the strength to love when it's hard to love, or to be patient when it's hard to be patient. Obviously there's situations, as you will know, where it is vital that you are apart, that God doesn't want us to go through aspects that are harmful to us, that are going to be absolutely not what he wants us in. But I'm talking about, I guess, the more everyday things that people do tend to split up over, whether it's just not feeling the romance or not feeling the love. But we can ask we can ask God to intervene and to help us, and to just be. And I think he does step in where he's given us a free will. When we actually say step in, he will move. When we do not choose, he's not going to force his way in. And it's actually something that I've been thinking again about lately, how in our world a lot of times free will stripped from us, whether we know it's being stripped or not. For us in the UK at the moment, the school system, often the schools have ability to choose some things that the parents do not have choice on. And I was thinking, isn't it interesting in this world that is moving away from God, that we somewhat are more controlled by things and have less choice, but yet God is all about choice. God is all about us choosing him, and he will move where we say move, and he will where we have faith, he will match it and beyond. It's definitely a relationship of free will and choice. So I guess in as I said, in my own relationship, having the experience of my parents split up has been helpful to me to evaluate my own commitment in my own relationships. And
it's hard work, and it takes intentional effort. And I think what you're talking about is really important, and you can go to God. And in my case, it's weird because like I said, I didn't choose either husband as a Christian. I wasn't going to church. I didn't have a relationship with Jesus, but he relentlessly pursued me. And so once I had received him, the very first thing, kind of after praying for my own family that I was with in that moment, that God pointed out was, hey, you need to be praying for them too. And it was only in my praying for them, where other people in the world would say, hey, you have every right, that's your ex-husband and his new wife, to not really want to be in their lives. God showed me 1 Corinthians 13 kind of love, right? Not to have an agenda, but to really love them. And it was from praying for them and loving them in that way, I was able to actually have them come to church, have them come to Christ, mentor. and all those things. And yet in the second marriage, I came to Christ in the midst of the marriage, and I was willing, to go to God, and I did. And that's how he built my faith, because I couldn't control what was happening in the dysfunction of another person. I couldn't make choices for them, but I could choose to go to God first, which is what I did. And God and I argued quite a lot, because I was ready to be done with that way sooner than God said. But what I can see now is that during the times that we were giving him grace through God, but still having boundaries and not in any way enabling, that God was working in my children. My daughter is now in the middle of her doctorate. She is a therapist who helps people with trauma and addiction and helps families all over the place. I have a son who will never, ever have alcohol or drugs, because he saw what happened in the family line, that other people in that ex-husband's life, in their family, struggled with that. And so what God has done is brought beautiful, good, valuable things out of what was a torturous time. Why? Because I brought them to him, and because I did it his way, because my way would have been completely different. And I did offer to God one day. I said, and this has got to be God, we pray before we start. I had no intentions of talking about these things, but we asked him, to have the conversation he wants to have. And so someone out there maybe needs to hear these things. But I remember it was about 2 years into being separated, and I was willing to stay married but separated, because that's biblical. And this one day, God brought all these memories to mind, that were really horrible, difficult things we went through while my ex-husband was active in addiction in our home. And I'm starting to cry there in the chair. And I was like, God, we worked through all those things. Why is this happening? And he said, because I want you to know, daughter, that I saw your heart, because you knew now about my covenant, and you knew that marriage was a covenant, and you knew by the time that you get marriage that you shouldn't break that covenant. But I'm reminding you with all these memories, you have biblical reason to get a divorce. He left the marriage. He left and abandoned your family long before he left physically. And that was when I moved forward with divorce. So I was willing to stay in it, because I didn't, I was a Christian by then, and I didn't want to do anything aside from how God wanted to do it. And God himself gave me the okay. So I just want you to understand that when we try to include God in stuff and we try to do things his way, amazing things happen. Like with the first marriage, being able to have that whole family be part of my family is an amazing, redemptive, beautiful part of my story. But also getting released when something was negative and honestly toxic and not what God intended marriage to be, that was a gift too.
I think that's amazing. And I think it comes back a little bit to what we were speaking about before. When we read the Bible, when we read scriptures, often we read it through our own understanding or our own experience. And sometimes, like as you've experienced in this case, God was able to bring light to that verse around marriage, to when there is reason to leave. And I think when our heart intention is to serve God, to love God, to follow his ways, he does reveal his ways. And what is the case for one person isn't necessarily the case for another. The word, he's unchanging. His word doesn't change, and he does not change. But his relationship with everybody and his instructions to everybody may seem somewhat unique and tailored to that person, because he is the God who created us and knows us intricately, and he as you said, he has different paths to take, and ultimately his heart is for all of his children to know him and love him and to be with him forever. And sometimes, as you said in your first marriage, you've been able to be part of that amazing journey of restoration. And on the second case, God has a plan for everybody at all times. And while you might not be part of that restoration for your second husband, God has plans for everybody that are different. So we can only but pray for the second husband, I suppose, that God isn't done because it didn't happen the same way. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And I think as Christians, we often look at other people and say, well, why isn't it happening like that for me? Or why isn't it why, God, if that's God, well, then why am I in a different situation? Or why can one entrepreneur be a millionaire and another be just, on small kind of beginnings? And again, I think God has plans and purposes for us that if we were all the same, we could not reach the world. We could not empathize with people that if you're a millionaire, you're not necessarily going to be able to talk to somebody that is in poverty the same way as somebody that is in that similar place. So we all take different paths, and God's love is unchanging. His purpose and plans for us are unchanging, but we all do experience different aspects so that we can actually have genuine relationships with other people that are based in a place of understanding.
Yeah, and that's what our stories, it's such a beautiful part of our stories. It's why I do this podcast. It's why I'm writing the current book I'm writing, to help people really look at and see what their story is and then share their stories. I feel like God's trying to cast a net over the world, right? And the net is made up of our stories, because your story is going to reach people. Mine will reach people. Yours won't. Everyone listening has unique things. And even in the broken places, even in the things that didn't go the way that God, would have wanted them to go for us, he still is able to work them together into a way that we can connect with other people. It bridges us to people going through similar things and brings his love and his hope and his peace to places where people don't have it yet. And they can see the before and the after. And it's one of the reasons why I started at the beginning. When you share your whole story, I think people are way more able to see God working. And here's the thing, you're a very accomplished person. If somebody looks at you right now and they say like, oh, well, they're accomplished, and they don't know that you ever struggled, you ever had something that was difficult for you, you ever had to put in the hard work about different parts of your life, then they don't think they can do what God has for them to do. And so I think it's really important when we're willing to be vulnerable and we're willing to share maybe some details that we don't normally talk about, that people can see like, oh, wait, maybe that look at all the things he changed. Wow, maybe he can do that for me too.
I think we're all vulnerable, even the most what we think, especially as humans, if we look at celebrities or people that seem accomplished, it's actually quite interesting if you look into the deeper levels, that everybody is vulnerable in some way or another. And it's important, I think, to realize that, especially we live in a world of social media. We look online, we see, oh, look, isn't that great? Everybody shares the best parts of them or what people want to see. But it's important to realize as well that the inside of a person and what they're struggling with is often hidden. And sometimes it's important as we go about our daily life to kind of almost be on the lookout, even if you have friends or family that seem like they've got everything that they need, that it's good to check in with them to say, hey, is there anything I can help you with? Is there anything you're struggling with? Is there? And I think it's important to be there for people that seemingly have it all together, because in my experience, nobody has nobody has an area that they're not struggling with. We all do. We all have.
I love that thought of being so intentional, because a lot of times it's the ones that look really strong who are dealing with the most, or people who have been through a lot, who have gotten genuinely strong, but they still have struggles. I'm a pretty strong Christian, and I've been through a lot of things, and I know where to go, but I still struggle, and people don't check in with me because they see me as strong. So I think it's really great. What a great thing to just stop for a moment. And if you get nothing else out of today's conversation, to intentionally and prayerfully look around at the people in your life and check in with them. I think that's amazing advice. Now, I want to get to some things that are going on now. And so God has had us definitely, God had a theme for today, and he's had us talking about some really important things. But I do want to talk to you about what you do. So it was during COVID that you started working on your first book journey, and it all started with telling your kids to roar like a dinosaur. Can you tell us a little bit about that book?
So I guess I never really thought of myself as being a children's book author. When I was younger, I kind of got prompted to write down some things I might want to do with my life, and writing was kind of on the list. But it was during COVID that my sons were brushing their teeth, and I was saying roll like a dinosaur, so they'd open up their mouth and I could get to the back of their teeth. And I'm terrible at the dentist. I'm so bad. I gag at anything, and they're not unlike that. So when they're brushing their teeth, I said open up so I can brush these back ones, and my son, I think, was kind of coughing and gagging a little bit, and I said to him, oh, at the time we were in COVID, so in England I think it was about the time if you went to school with a cough you would be sent home, or if you'd have to take a COVID test to make sure that you didn't have COVID before you're allowed to go to school. And I was quite concerned at the time with COVID, how many people were extremely anxious, and even with other Christians that I was talking to, that sometimes I would say, well, God is here with us. We have God to draw on. We can have faith in this time. But I was, I guess, concerned at how much God was getting pushed out in the media. But well, God rarely gets shouted out in the media, but there was a lot of negative talk and fear and anxiety being pushed through the media and through, I guess, what the community, what would be coming through the schools and things like that. So I said to the kids at the time, oh, you might have to take a COVID test, you're coughing kind of thing. And I just had this idea of, we were kind of laughing in the kitchen and making light of the fact that even in times that were pretty confusing and kids couldn't go to what they usually would love to do, soft play, that we could still as a family have fun together and enjoy stories. So I started telling the story about a dinosaur who went to school and he wanted to fit in, but he was feeling really worried because people thought he was going to be scary. And in the kitchen, I only had the middle part of the story, that he went to school and somehow he was holding his breath and didn't want to roar. So when he got to the school, he started coughing because he was out of breath. And it was a misunderstanding that the teachers sent him home and said, take a test. But in my story, the dinosaur doesn't know what a test is. He thinks it's a school test. It's his first day of school. He thinks, I don't know anything. I haven't learnt anything. How could I even know anything? So I'll just go home for 10 days. And then I was telling my kids this story, and I thought, okay, the next symptom at the time was a loss of taste and smell. So he goes again. The next time he goes to school, he thinks, right, I've got it. I'm not going to get sent home. I'm going to walk into school telling everyone I can't smell or taste anything, so that way they won't be scared that I'm going to eat them. And of course, then he gets sent home for 10 days. At the end of that 10 days, it's winter in the UK, and he's forgotten his coat. He's been inside. He doesn't realize how cold it is. And then he goes to school and he's all shivering because he's not dressed appropriately, and he's thinking, right, I definitely don't want to be sent home. I really want to be at school. I want to make friends. And so he sings a little song. I kind of had the song feeling hot, hot, hot in my head. Ole, 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 feeling hot, hot, hot. So I kind of had this song in my head. And so he goes into school singing this kind of little tune. And of course, there's a bit of dialogue with the teacher says, do you know your temperature? And again, the dinosaur wants to seem smart. So he kind of has this amusing conversation only to be sent home again. So the whole idea for my book was really to try and capture aspects of the history of what we were going through, but not make it a doom and gloom story, but make it a story of this dinosaur who's feeling anxious for different reasons, for not being sure how he can fit in, how can he make friends when he has this obstacle of everybody thinking he's a certain way. And then through the history of what we'd been through, he comes to a place of self-discovery. He realizes when he embraces who he is as a dinosaur and that he has his own unique skills and talents that nobody else has. He ends up going into a forest, which it's all set in my local area, and he prays for faith and guidance, or no, he prays for guidance. And in that moment in the forest, he finds something amazing that everybody needs in society, and society kind of gets back to normal. And then he, in the last scene of the book, he's in the soft play pit, which is what my sons really were missing, and they were sad they couldn't go to soft play. So he's in the ball pit having fun with his friends. So that's kind of stemmed from just me being in the kitchen with my kids storytelling, and I really felt led to write this story, and it took a long time to get it together. We had some volunteers on the project who also wanted to give back to kids who had to homeschool and miss out on key aspects of their schooling year. So we came up with some sponsors, community sponsors. The local school got behind us, and we ended up giving away 700 books or so in the local community. And
I love that. So I love this part of your story, and I want to make sure that everybody heard it. I love that in the midst of something, right? Because that's where actually most children's stories come from. Something somebody went through, and realizing like, wait, little kids like are dealing with this too. It's hard enough for adults. Let's do something to help them kind of grapple with it. I love that. And one of the things I just wrote down on the side of my paper is, I think that a lot of times when you're feeling fearful or anxious, people tend to say, I have anxiety. And instead, it should be our alert to pray.
Definitely.
Like anxiety is actually like a gift that, wait, something doesn't feel right. Okay, what do I do with this? I go to God. And I love that that's what your dinosaur does. He actually goes, he ends up praying. So I love all of that. Now, you had told me how this took you into a place of a ministry. You all started with one book, and now you're in this place where there's a publishing company, you have a ministry, you're helping other people. You yourself are an idea person, coming with a teaching background and helping people kind of understand how to implement the ideas that they're having. What has that experience been like for you to help other people?
Yeah, sure. So after I had written this book and got it out into the community, I guess I was part of author groups, Facebook groups, and I would readily respond to people. Or if I was so blessed in that journey, having so many people like the illustrator come and sponsor the book, the graphic designer sponsor the book, and part of the reason why they did that was I said I want to give back. I want to help raise money for charities. I want to give back. And what I didn't actually realize was going to happen is that because they'd helped me, and because so many sponsors had come and helped me, that I wanted to help other authors to be able to create a book and do what they felt passionate about, because I'd felt so passionately about doing this book and getting it out there that I now wanted to be the cheerleaders for other people in the same boat that I'd been in. So I was on some Facebook groups, and I'd offered to help do some beta reading, and then through a couple of other contacts that lived locally, I found out that they were writing children's books, and I just offered to help them on their journey. And as I did that, I realized one lady in particular had some help, and she said, I want you on my team. I want you to be doing all my books. I just think what you do is great. And so out of that sparked a conversation, I suppose, with different people about how I could help them. And I would often help edit their books, and then sometimes I would help design aspects of their books. And I really could see that this was something that God was leading me into. But at the same time that I was offering practical help with their books, a lot of people, I remember having a conversation with somebody. It was 3:00 in the morning in the UK, and they were on a Facebook group having a little crisis about their book. And I won't go into the details too much, but I just knew that I wanted to encourage her and give her some practical help on how she could possibly fix what she could foresee as a massive problem in getting the book sorted. And as I was talking to her, I just felt really led to ask her to pray. I said, can I say a prayer for you? And it turns out that she has a faith, and that prompting was God, and we prayed together. And she said to me, oh, I just feel like I can do this now. I've got the ability to move forward. And as it turned out, in the subsequent days, I felt a bit led to just give her some other help, and I sent it to her. And my sons are brilliant. They do love to edit and design themselves, and I was sitting with my son saying, let's see how we can help her, and we were trying to work out aspects of her book, and we sent it to her, and we ended up working together, which was amazing. But I know that alongside all the people that I work with, while I can offer practical help, whether it's editing or design or using my experience, as I said, of knowing how language can be interpreted by different people. And with my music background, obviously rhyming and rhythms is something that naturally comes through that music background. Yeah. I also know that I'm very relational, and one of the biggest things that I enjoy doing is making connections. So if somebody is writing a book and they're writing a book about brushing teeth, and I know a dentist who's looking for or who's looking for a resource, I'm that kind of person that wants to kind of help connect different people together. So I think in the ministry side of things, that sometimes it's about meeting people through having relationships, through forming meaningful relationships with the people that I work with, having insight into some of their struggles of what they're going through, and being able to pray with them and support them and remind them that God is there for them and loves them, whether they're a Christian or not a Christian. I have found that to be, an amazing gift, to be able to say to people that they're not alone in those struggles, and then obviously be able to pray for people in my own personal time, but also knowing that sometimes it's just about it's my job is simply about having a heart to connect people with the person that they need to connect with, and knowing that in the job side of things, in our walk and in the workplace, I guess for anyone in the workplace, that you might be doing a job, whether it's working at McDonald's, whether it's working for a big accountant, whether it's being in a shopping market, but we have the ability to sow seeds in people's lives and connect people with other people that can sow seeds into their life. So I do see what I do as a ministry, and I do see all of my relationships that I build with my clients as much more than just work for me. And I think
we're back to the community and collaboration part we were talking about in the beginning. God desires us to have that, and he gives us gifts to use within creating community and collaboration's the way to do it. And that connection piece that you have, not everyone has a heart to do that. You might think, oh, well, that person might be able to help them, or that person has that similar interest, and not do a darn thing about it. So, certainly what you're doing is really essential and crucial to a lot of people's success.
I think it's quite amazing to me how God tees up people. I think the most interesting thing is obviously Facebook and social media. I've never been one for social media, but definitely since being on the author journey, I have had a lot more interaction. But it was even the other day, it was quite amazing that I had wanted to put out a post. As I said, I've really wanted of late to put out some posts on the author groups about reminding people about we're here for each other, that we are a community of people on this Facebook group that help each other. And I had an idea for authors that in terms of marketing, and I had wanted to put out this idea for a while, but I've been so busy, and I just thought the other night, I've got a lot to do, but it's on my mind, it's on my heart, I'm going to put it out there. And so I wrote this post, and it was interesting how a lady who was in America she kind of, one of the parts of the post was about free ebooks, and she posted and said, I actually have a free ebook, and we were trying to connect her up with some other authors that could support her. And again, I just felt the prompting of, this timing is the fact that it works for her so perfectly. I feel like God is reminding her that she's not alone and she's loved. And I had a little look at her Facebook page, and I could see a Christian post, or I'd been to church this morning. And so I messaged her privately, and I said, I just felt prompted to say that, you're valued, and that God cares. If this timing's just kind of worked out, but it's reminding you that he will connect you. His timing is perfect. And it was interesting. She just said, I just so needed to hear that. And it just was the right timing for her to hear that. And it reminded me that it's in the simple things. It goes back to those simple things again, that it was just in that prompting of writing a strategy for authors that would help them, but being faithful to that, stopping the busyness and saying, okay, I'm going to prioritize community, and then seeing in the small way that it's reminded someone that God cares for them. And I just love it how me over in the UK doing something which people would never think would be how God might speak to someone far away from me in the US. And I think we often forget that the small miracles are little things as well, that I knew in my book journey that God provided for me, and that certain people came on board, which could only be through the grace of God, that they would give their time for my project. And I just think it's amazing how in that situation, I suppose, that God can do miracles in the small things. He can do miracles through a social media post. He can do miracles through someone just feeling that prompting and saying, I'm going to message that person. So
I think there's some of his best miracles are the everyday moments. They're my favorite. And honestly, you and I are only connected because I connected to somebody else I've never met in person, became really good friends with her, outside of having her on the podcast. We support each other back and forth, and she had suggested that maybe we should talk. And you guys knew each other because of the children's book world. So, the tapestry of what God is doing, that interconnective net I was talking about of stories and people's realities, right? And the way that he has it all set. There are so many places for what I call cross-pollination, right? Where we are meant to work together, and there's different layers and levels and things he has planned. You had talked in the beginning of our conversation about Jesus being a community and being with the 12 disciples, but then there were certain times where he was with the 3, and other times where he was with all of them, and other times where we hear about him sending out more people, about the 70, and so there are all these different opportunities, and it all goes back to doing it in the prompting of his spirit, being the one who's willing to be an encourager, being the one who's willing to, in a busy schedule, take the time and follow what you're hearing God say, trusting that he knows what he's doing. I have no idea how this podcast is being listened to all over the world. That's God. All I did was say, hey, I'm in the middle of a pandemic, taking care of my parents, shut off in this farmhouse, can't go to church, can't go anywhere, can't be around anybody, even my own family, because I'm taking care of these elderly people you asked me to take care of. And I'm just sharing the gospel. And next thing I know, here I am, right? So God has a plan, and it's good. And that's really what every story ends with. And I wish that I could sit and talk with you. I probably could sit and talk with you a couple more hours if I got another cup of coffee. But I am at the point where we need to come to an ending. So I do have one more question for you.
Sure.
This is a question that I end every one of the podcasts with. And before I ask it, I do want to remind people, I always do this at the end as well, because our memories aren't always so good, that I will share in the show notes links for you to be able to follow along with all this wonderful ministry that Stacey's doing. And I would suggest following her on social media and taking a look at what we show you and offer there, because I definitely have fairly enjoyed being connected. But back to your question. So if you could go and give your younger self any advice, what would that be?
Oh, okay. I guess it is listening to God in the small things. I guess there's been some parts of my life where I guess I've heard the voice of God, or maybe not spent enough time seeking out further instructions. So I think the advice to my younger self would be, in your choices, I mean, I'm a very, very cautious person. If I'm going to make a decision, I usually grapple with it for a very, very long time. But I would even say to my younger self, seek God, and in the parts where you feel prompted as a no, to really heed those no's. And in those places where you feel prompted to step out. But I guess always ground yourself in the Word of God, and to seek it out and to study it out, and to, I suppose, if you feel that God's speaking to you in an area, to definitely have a team of people around you that can help you process that. So I think my younger self would be to always seek out the Word of God, go with those promptings, even when they are stop, or take a moment, or to if there's something that gets flagged, to not brush it aside, but to say, okay, no, I'm going to seek God. I'm going to really seek good counsel, and make sure the people, I suppose, that you seek counsel from are people that, like you and I, you can tell when we speak, there's a rapport between us, and that you have sound godly wisdom. So make sure the people that you're surrounding yourself with are going to be uplifting and encouraging you, and taking you to the place, helping you to walk to the places that God has for you. I guess the people that you surround yourself with are definitely, they can be life-giving or they can be life-draining. So I guess that would be the advice, just, I suppose, to always heed the voice, not only in the promptings, which I think I find easier to do. Like, I find if there's a prompting to do, I find easier. If there's a prompting to stop or to wait or to just seek a little bit more, to really to go to those places with God.
Yeah. No, I think that's really wise advice. And that's why I asked the question, because it's not like we can go back, right? But there are people listening who can take these words of wisdom and they can apply them to their life right now. Definitely. And I think that every answer has always had really good nuggets of the good stuff in it. Because when you think back, it's the things that you maybe didn't know how to do or weren't aware of, that's what you would want now to be able to say. And so those are things that people listening can pick up and kind of put in their own tool belt. Well, I have had so much fun in getting a chance to talk with you. It was obvious God was part of this conversation and had a plan for the things he wanted us to share about. I'm grateful you're willing to kind of go along with the flow of his leading. Sometimes it takes us, we prepare, I do my due diligence. Sometimes we don't get to have the questions. This was one of those times, but I do feel like God really coherently told a story today, and he had us talk about things that he wants people to really be thinking about. So I just want to thank you for joining us, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you for having me, and God bless in all your ventures as well.
Thank you.
Hey, so I just want to thank you so much for spending your time with me. And I want to challenge you to go out today and to just take notice and to stop and really look around and find at least one good thing, one thing to be thankful for. If you do that today, you're going to find so many more things tomorrow without even trying. Because once you start, you begin to see what's always been there. And if you need a refill, you can come join me again for another cup. Make sure to subscribe and have an awesome day, and go be grateful.